So I need to apologize to Laura. I need to apologize here because the first time my mom killed my dog, I was 7 years old. Now, to be clear, I spent a lot more time in life wanting a dog than I remembered actually having a dog. I remembered begging my parents, oh, come on, we need to get a dog, we need to get a dog. And first they started by saying things like, oh, we're too busy, it's a big responsibility. But then they would say these vague things, and they would talk about certain pre-me dogs that the family may have had. And we're not dog people, my mom said. But in the mid-'70s, the movie Benji was responsible for a lot of ill-prepared families getting dogs. And we were no different. So we went to a local farm. We picked up something that was half sheepdog, half mutt. And we named it Tiffy, which, if you remember the movie Benji, Tiffany was the love interest of Benji. And we brought Tiffy home. And from the beginning, it was a tenuous relationship. Tiffy was far more interested in what was going on in that back field behind our house. And she thought for sure there was a flock of sheep out there, and if she could just get out to them, well, everything would be better. And she'd come home hours later, she's smelling of skunk, covered in briars, and my mom would be washing her in the tub, and she'd be gritting through her teeth. We're not dog people. Now, accountants will tell you that you're more than likely to have a car accident when you're close to your home, and my mother's responsible for that statistic. She's never had an open highway accident, but driveways, mailboxes, garages have all proved to be worthy adversaries through the years. So, because Tiffy wasn't housebroken, she was a sheepdog, we kept her in the garage. And one day, my mom comes home, opens the garage door, Tiffy runs out, and my mother pulls right over Tiffy. She calls my father at the phone company, says, Donald, you better come home. He comes home, he loosens his necktie, he rolls up his sleeves, cracks open a fresh pack of Newports, and gets to dig in a hole at the back of the yard, close to the field where, quite frankly, Tiffy wanted to be anyway. He gets done, they put Tiffy in the ground, they cover him up. My mom goes, are you certain she's dead? And my dad goes, well, I'm certain now. So immediately I start asking for more dogs, but now my mom says, we're not dog people, and I've got the proof. And as I got older, I realized there were other things we weren't. Shortly thereafter, my sister got a gerbil, and she named him Felix. But Felix smelled like a gerbil. So one day, my mother goes back to the field. Tiffy's not out there, but plenty of other rodents are, and she lets the gerbil go. We're not gerbil people, she said. So a few years later, I'm now begging for an aquarium. And I get a 10-gallon aquarium, and I fill it up with tropical fish. But it turns out that the water quality for Amazonian fish is way different than that comes out of the wells of northern Pennsylvania. The water clouds. 2 days later, the fish are all dead on the bottom. My mom's dumping them in the toilet. We're not fish people, she said. Truth be told, there were other things that I learned that we weren't, but this is storytelling, it's a rule of threes. Now, later on, I get married, and I want to change my legacy. So my wife and I go, and we get a miniature schnoodle, which we appropriately named Doodles. And I set to house training him, and he was smart as a whip. Housebroken in no time. He could obey. He could fetch the Sunday newspaper, and this is before the internet had come along, when the Sunday newspaper was huge. He could drag it in every week. But despite that, there were two things I couldn't train out of him. The first was a near pathological hatred of the UPS truck. He would sit at the window, snarling, every time the UPS truck went by. But more troubling was, well, he also didn't like my kids. He would growl at them often, snip at them a lot, and occasionally even bite them. And so I finally had to look at my wife one day and say, maybe we're not dog people. But the interesting thing is my father had passed away, and my mother had remarried to an honest-to-goodness dog person, a man who had had dogs all throughout his life. And they were pretty amazed that this dog could fetch the paper, and so Doodles went to live very happily with my parents for several years. So one day at work, my phone rings, and it's my mom. And her voice sounds different. It's very light. She's nearly crying. This is a woman who went through Depression-era orphanage. This is a woman who let go of a gerbil just because it smelled bad. And she's nearly crying. What happened? I asked my mom. Well, on a macro level, what had happened was Jeff Bezos and Amazon had gotten so popular that now the UPS truck was running to Christiana. And Doodles was out front doing his business, and the UPS truck comes down the road, and Doodles comes in and goes right for that UPS truck and is killed instantly. My mom's voice is like I've never heard it before. And she's nearly crying, and she goes, I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? And I wondered then, had she felt that way when she ran over Tiffy? Had she felt the regret when she let the gerbil loose? Had she felt pain when she took the fish and flushed them down the toilet? And I said, Mom, of course I forgive you. You know, we're not really dog people. And besides, it ain't the first time. Thank you.